The snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes drifting down in slow, steady curtains that softened the sharp edges of the city, muffled the traffic into a distant hush, and turned the streets into something that looked less like a busy December night and more like a still frame from a Christmas postcard. And as Daniel Morrison walked home from the Christmas Eve service at their church, with his 6-year-old daughter Emma pressed close to his side, her small gloved hand wrapped tightly in his, he felt the strange mix of gratitude and ache that had become so familiar since the day his world had split in two. At 34, he technically had everything most people claimed to dream about. 3 years earlier, he had sold his tech startup for a sum that still felt unreal whenever he saw it written out. And now there was a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, cars he rarely bothered to drive, investments set up to ensure that he and his daughter would never have to worry about money again. And yet, as he listened to Emma bouncing along beside him in her bright pink coat and red and white hat, chattering breathlessly about Santa, reindeer, and how she was certain she had been good enough this year for extra presents, he felt the hollow space inside his chest where Julia should have been, the quiet ache for his wife, who had died 2 years ago, from a sudden aneurysm that had stolen her in a single brutal day, one moment laughing over breakfast, and the next gone by dinner, leaving Daniel and Emma to piece together a life out of what was left. They were passing a narrow alley between 2 buildings, the kind of shadowed gap you normally avoided without thinking about it, when Daniel heard a sound that cut through the muffled calm of the snow, the faint, irregular clatter of someone rummaging through trash, paired with the strained, uneven rhythm of a person trying not to cry. And for a heartbeat he considered speeding up, focusing on the warm apartment waiting for them, the hot chocolate, the Christmas stories by the tree, shielding Emma from whatever sadness might be hiding in that darkness. But something in that small, raw sound refused to let him walk away, and he turned his head to look. Under the weak orange glow of a street lamp, he saw a young woman leaning into a dumpster, one arm digging through the trash while the other clutched a battered notebook pressed tightly to her chest, as if it were the only thing holding her together. She wore what had obviously once been a pretty cream-colored dress, with a delicate pattern that now hung in torn, stained folds, and over it a gray hooded sweater so full of holes and hurried stitches that it seemed to be losing the battle against the cold. Her blonde hair fell in tangled clumps around a face that was sharp with hunger and exhaustion, and even at a distance Daniel could see that she was shaking, whether from the weather or from sheer lack of strength he couldn't tell, until she pulled a half-eaten sandwich from the trash and let out a sound that hovered somewhere between a sob and a sigh of relief. "Daddy, why is that lady looking in the trash?" Emma asked in a small, confused voice. And at the sound, the woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic like a frightened animal caught in the beam of an oncoming car. For a moment she just stared at them, and in the lamplight Daniel could see that while her face was gaunt and hollowed by hardship, her features were fine, almost delicate, and beneath the fear in her gaze there was a sharp intelligence that did not match the situation she was in. She stammered an apology, tightening her grip on the notebook and saying she would leave, insisting that she was going, that she hadn't meant to bother anyone, her voice hoarse and frayed but carrying the tone of someone educated, someone who had once sat in classrooms instead of alleys. Daniel, feeling something inside him harden into resolve, asked her gently not to go, and the woman paused, torn, her eyes flicking to Emma, this little girl in a clean, bright coat, warm and secure. And something in her expression crumbled as she whispered that she was sorry Emma had to see her like this, that no child should have to watch someone digging through trash to eat. Emma, unburdened by adult shame or hesitation, asked with simple concern if the lady was hungry. And although the woman tried to say she was fine, claiming she just needed to get by, her body betrayed her with a loud growl from her empty stomach, and she closed her eyes as if she wanted the pavement to swallow her. Daniel made his choice in that moment, and did not look back from it. He told her that he would like to buy her dinner, that there was a diner just around the corner, and that on Christmas Eve, no one should be alone and hungry. And though she tried to refuse, insisting she didn't need charity, her voice shook and her hand trembled around the pathetic sandwich, until tears began to slip down her dirt-streaked cheeks, and she whispered that she used to be someone, that she used to matter, and now she didn't even recognize how she had ended up here. Daniel told her with quiet firmness that she still mattered, that every person did, that this would be just a meal and nothing more. And he introduced himself and Emma by name, offering her the basic dignity of being seen. The woman looked at Emma's open, gentle face, and then back at Daniel, and finally said that her name was Clare, adding in a hushed, almost ashamed voice that she hadn't eaten in 3 days. Inside the diner, the warmth hit them like a wave, wrapping them in the smells of coffee, frying bacon, and something sweet baking in the back, with tinsel strung along the counter, and a small, slightly crooked Christmas tree blinking in the corner. The hostess glanced skeptically at Claire's torn clothes and unwashed hair, but whatever reluctance she felt dissolved under Daniel's steady, no-arguments gaze, and she led them to a booth without another word. Emma slid into the middle seat between Daniel and Clare, as if that was the only arrangement that made sense. And Daniel ordered hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Emma, coffee for himself and Clare, and then told Clare to order as much food as she wanted. When she asked, her voice breaking, if he really meant anything, he assured her he did, and she chose soup, a sandwich, eggs, toast, and a side of bacon, the order of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to know when her next meal was coming. When the plates arrived, she tried to eat slowly at first, clearly fighting to maintain some semblance of dignity, but soon the sheer force of her hunger overpowered any restraint, and she ate with a fierce, desperate focus, tears streaming constantly down her cheeks even as she lifted each bite to her mouth. Emma watched in silence for a while, then nudged her mug toward Clare and offered her hot chocolate if she was thirsty, and when Clare declined and said gently that the drink was Emma's and she should enjoy it, Emma asked with the direct, unvarnished honesty of a child whether Clare was homeless. Daniel started to gently redirect his daughter, but Clare stopped him and said Emma deserved the truth, then answered that yes, she was homeless, that she had lost her home, and when Emma asked why, Clare explained in a wavering voice that it had been a mix of mistakes and bad luck and loss until everything slipped away. When Daniel asked what was in the notebook she guarded so fiercely, Clare hesitated, then slowly opened it to reveal page after page of flowing handwriting, stories, poems, the beginnings of a novel, and explained that she had been, and still was in her heart, a writer, that she had been finishing her MFA at Columbia with a teaching assistantship, a small apartment, and a future full of words and students and books, until her mother had been diagnosed with cancer. She told them how she had spent all her savings on medical bills, dropped out of school to care for her mother, watched her die 6 months earlier, and how everything had collapsed after that. Falling behind on rent, losing the apartment, losing her job because she no longer had an address, sliding into a life of shelters and park benches and underpasses with terrifying speed. The notebook, she said, was all she had managed to keep, the one thing that still belonged to her, the stories on those pages the only constant that had kept her from breaking completely. When Daniel asked where she slept now, she answered in a flat tone that she stayed in shelters when there was room and on benches or under bridges when there wasn't, adding that she had become one of the invisible ones, the people others avoided making eye contact with and stepped around on sidewalks, pretending not to see. And before he could respond, Emma blurted out that she saw Clare, that she wasn't invisible at all. Clare reached out to gently touch Emma's hand, overcome by the simple kindness, and Daniel felt his thoughts race ahead of him. He saw in his mind's eye the empty guest suite in his penthouse, the unused bathroom, the closets of clothes, the extra place at the table that still felt like it belonged to Julia, and he heard his wife's voice in memory urging him to use what they'd been given to actually change lives, not just sign checks and forget. He told Claire that he wanted to make her an offer and asked her to listen before refusing, then explained that he had a guest suite with 2 bedrooms, a private bathroom, and a small kitchenette that had been empty since his wife died, and that she could stay there for as long as she needed. No strings, no expectations, simply a warm, safe place while she found her footing again. She tried to say no, insisting that he didn't know her, that she could be anyone, even dangerous. But he gently countered that she wasn't dangerous, that she was simply someone who had been hit by a series of blows that would have knocked down almost anyone, and that he had more resources than he could ever use in his lifetime. He told her that after Julia's death, when he could barely function, people had shown up for him and Emma. Friends cooking meals, neighbors taking care of Emma when he was paralyzed by grief, his sister moving in for months to help, and that he had learned then that sometimes helping had nothing to do with who deserved what, and everything to do with being human enough to step in when you saw someone drowning. Through tears, Claire said that things like this didn't happen in real life, that people didn't just swoop in and save you. And he answered softly that maybe they should, and then asked once more if her answer was yes. Looking at her notebook, at Emma's earnest face, and finally at Daniel's steady eyes, Claire whispered that it was, that she would accept, and thanked him in a broken voice. When they reached his apartment and he showed her the guest suite, Claire stood in the doorway and stared, overwhelmed by the clean, soft bed, the warm lamplight, the fresh towels, and the simple luxury of a space that belonged to her even for one night. She broke down again, insisting she would ruin everything, that her dirt and exhaustion would contaminate his beautiful home. But Daniel told her firmly that she would not ruin a thing, that there were clean towels waiting, and that he would leave some of Julia's clothes outside the bathroom door, clothes she could wear after a hot shower, adding that his wife had been about her size and would have wanted her to have them. Claire touched his arm and told him Julia sounded like a wonderful person, and that she was sorry for his loss, and he replied that he was sorry for hers as well. Under the hot spray of the shower, Claire sobbed as the dirt, cold, and terror of the past month slid away, and when she stepped out and dressed in the soft, lavender-scented clothes. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror, seeing not the invisible homeless stranger people avoided, but traces of the writer she used to be and the possibility of the woman she might become again. In the main living area, she found Daniel reading a Christmas story to Emma, who was already in her pajamas, her eyes drooping with sleep, and when Emma saw her, she lit up and told her she looked pretty, a compliment that nearly brought Claire to tears once more. She thanked them both and immediately tried to promise that she would find a job quickly, pay him back, and fix everything. But Daniel gently stopped her, saying that tonight was Christmas Eve, and the only thing she needed to do was rest. Tomorrow they could worry about the rest. When Emma asked if Claire could read them a Christmas story because she was a real writer, Claire looked startled, then agreed, and Daniel told her that it would be more than okay. So Claire sat down on the couch beside them, and with the same clear, thoughtful voice that filled her written pages, read, "'Twas the night before Christmas," aloud, the words flowing through the quiet apartment like a blessing, and somewhere before she finished, Emma fell asleep between them, safe and warm and unaware of how much had shifted in one night. Daniel, brushing his daughter's hair back from her face, told Claire that Emma liked her, and Claire, looking at the little girl's peaceful expression, said that Emma was wonderful and that Daniel was too, and that she still could not quite believe any of this was real, that a few hours earlier she had been digging through a dumpster and now she was here, clean, warm, and included. He told her to believe it, that tomorrow they would get her clothes, a phone, help with documents, and introduce her to people who might be able to offer work, including contacts in publishing who would want to read her stories, but that tonight the only thing that mattered was that she was safe, and that, whether she believed it yet or not, she was home. Claire repeated the word home slowly, as if relearning the taste of it, and admitted she had forgotten what that feeling was like. Over the following weeks, Clare began to rebuild, step by step. With Daniel's help, she replaced her lost identification, opened a bank account, and attended job interviews in well-fitting clothes instead of the ragged sweater. His editor friend read her writing and was impressed enough to offer her paid work on several articles. And in the evenings, she joined Daniel and Emma for dinners, movie nights, and shared routines that slowly shifted from temporary help into something that looked and felt like family. Daniel and Emma did more than give her a roof. They gave her back a sense of belonging, of being someone who was not invisible or broken beyond repair, but valued, trusted, and loved. And in return, Clare brought into their home a gentleness, creativity, and gratitude that began to stitch together some of the torn places left by Julia's absence, turning a chance encounter in a snowy alley on Christmas Eve into the beginning of a new story none of them had seen coming. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness, compassion, and the courage to really see each other can change lives in ways money alone never could, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more emotional, life-changing stories about second chances, unexpected family, and the quiet miracles that happen when we choose to help instead of walking past. Emma had quickly decided that some things in their new life were non-negotiable, and one of them was that Clare should be the one to read her bedtime stories. Soon their evenings settled into a gentle rhythm of shared routines, in which Clare's voice floated through the apartment as she read aloud, Emma curled against her side, and on weekends they all piled onto the couch in comfortable clothes to watch movies together, sharing popcorn and laughing at the same scenes until the distance between guest and family all but disappeared. One morning over breakfast, while Clare poured juice and Daniel buttered toast, Emma announced in the matter-of-fact tone only a child can manage that Clare was becoming part of their family, then turned to her father and asked him to confirm it. Daniel met Clare's eyes across the table, saw the flicker of hope and fear there, and answered simply that Emma was right. 3 months later, Clare's life looked almost unrecognizable compared to the night Daniel had first met her in the snow. She had secured a position as a junior editor at a literary magazine, had sold several articles under her own byline, and was steadily working on the novel that had once lived only in her notebook, while Daniel helped with Emma's homework, and proudly saved every issue that carried Clare's name. She had moved out of the guest suite into a small but cozy apartment a short walk away, her own key, her own rent, her own address again, but she still came over for dinner 3 nights a week, still read Emma to sleep whenever she could, still showed up for school events and Saturday trips to the park, weaving herself so thoroughly into their routines that it was hard for any of them to remember what their days had looked like before she arrived. 6 months after that, on a warm summer evening that smelled faintly of cut grass and city heat cooling off the pavement, Daniel and Clare sat together on his balcony while Emma slept inside. The city lights spread beneath them like a glittering map of all the lives they would never know. Clare rested her arms on the railing for a long moment, then drew a slow breath and told him there was something she needed to say, and as he turned to look at her, the woman who had stepped into their lives on a freezing Christmas Eve, who had transformed from a desperate stranger clutching a notebook to someone essential to his and Emma's happiness, he felt his heart tighten with a fear he barely dared to name. She kept her eyes on the city as she admitted that she was falling in love with him, not just with him, but with Emma, with the life they had built together, and immediately stumbled into disclaimers about power dynamics, about gratitude, about how inappropriate it probably was to love the man who had helped save her. Daniel gently turned her face toward him and told her that he was falling in love with her too, that he had been for months, and that the only reason he had stayed silent was because he never wanted her to feel obligated or indebted. When she answered that she loved him, that she loved Emma and the version of herself she had discovered in their home, tears shining in her eyes, He kissed her with quiet certainty and told her that he and Emma wanted her in their lives not as a charity case or someone they had once rescued, but as family, as the person they couldn't imagine living without. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, they returned deliberately to the alley where it had all begun, standing together beside the same dumpster that had once held a half-eaten sandwich and the last thread of Claire's hope. Emma, now 7 and brimming with excitement, held both their hands as they looked at the spot where their stories had collided. Claire said softly that this was where everything had changed, the place where she had believed she had lost everything, and had instead stumbled into everything that truly mattered. And Daniel replied that this was where he and Emma had found the missing piece of their family. When Emma asked eagerly if they were going to do the thing, Claire took an envelope from her bag and revealed a check for $100,000 made out to the city's homeless services, explaining that it was the advance from her book deal, the memoir she had written about losing everything and finding her way back, and that they were donating it to create a program for homeless individuals who wanted to pursue education and artistic careers, a scholarship and support fund called the Clare Morrison Fellowship, named for both the woman she had once been and the woman she had become. Together they walked to the nearby mailbox, slipped the envelope through the slot, and then headed home along the same route they had taken that first snowy night, the streetlights shining down on them like small, steady stars. As they walked, Claire thanked Daniel for seeing her when she had felt invisible, for helping when he had no logical reason to, for giving her back a life she had believed was finished. Daniel thanked her in return, for allowing them to love her, for becoming Emma's mother in all the ways that mattered, for teaching them that family was less about blood and more about choice, about showing up, about the kind of love that stayed. Emma swung between them, holding their hands and wishing them both a Merry Christmas, and Claire still felt her throat tighten every time the word "mommy" left Emma's lips, even though it had been 6 months since their small wedding where Emma, serious and proud, had scattered flower petals down the aisle. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep and the apartment had settled into a deep, peaceful quiet, Daniel and Claire sat together on the couch in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, the ornaments reflecting little sparks of color across the room. Claire wore the same cream-colored dress she had been wearing the night they met, now cleaned and mended and transformed from a symbol of hunger and despair into a reminder of survival and grace, a garment she chose every Christmas Eve to mark the distance she had traveled. When Daniel asked what she was thinking about, she told him that she was remembering how close she had come to giving up entirely. She explained that the night he had found her, she had been sitting by that dumpster writing goodbye letters in her notebook, one to her mother, one to the life she had lost, and one to the version of herself she no longer recognized, because her plan had been to walk into the river the next day and let the current decide what happened. Her voice broke as she recalled how Emma had asked if she was hungry, and Daniel had offered her dinner, and how that simple act had given her a reason to survive just one more day, then another, and then another, until the idea of disappearing slowly loosened its hold. Daniel pulled her close and told her that he was so grateful she was still here, that he could not imagine a life without her. And she answered that she felt the same, looking around at the tree, the stockings with all 3 of their names, and the warm, lived-in space that had become home. She reminded him of the words she had spoken that first night, when she had sobbed that she used to be someone, and told him that she now understood how wrong she had been. She confessed that she had always been someone, that the value had never disappeared even when her circumstances collapsed, but that she had been unable to see it until he and Emma reflected it back to her through their kindness. They had shown her, she said, that worth was not about a bank account, a degree, or what you still possessed after life had taken its share, but about who you were in the moments when someone else needed help, how you chose to treat people when it would have been easier to look away. Daniel answered with quiet certainty that she would have done the same for someone else, and she promised that she would, that this was precisely why she had created the fellowship, to extend the same kind of lifeline she had been given, to pass the gift forward instead of letting it end with them. In the soft flicker of the tree lights, they sat side by side, two people who by all ordinary logic should never have crossed paths. A wealthy widower and a homeless writer, brought together by a snowstorm, a chance glance into an alley, and a little girl's simple question, "Are you hungry?" And yet they had become proof that salvation sometimes arrives in unexpected shapes, that the person digging through trash on Christmas Eve might turn out to be the missing piece of your life, and that reaching out to help someone else can be the very thing that pulls you out of your own grief. Daniel had given Clare a home, shelter, and a path back to her work, but she had given him something just as precious: renewed purpose, a reason to believe in goodness again, a partner to walk alongside him, and a mother for Emma who loved the child with the same fierce devotion he did. As Clare drifted toward sleep nestled against him, she understood that the real miracle of their story was not the money, the apartment, or even the book deal, important as those blessings were. The miracle was the connection itself, the way human beings could rescue each other simply by truly seeing one another, by refusing to look away from suffering, by offering help without calculating the cost. She had once believed that her story had ended in a dirty alley beside a dumpster, but now she knew that what had felt like the worst moment of her life had been the first page of the best chapter, that losing everything had carved out the space for what actually mattered to arrive, and that sometimes the person you think you are saving is, in ways you don't yet understand, quietly saving you right back. If this journey of Daniel, Clare, and Emma touched your heart or reminded you that one act of kindness can rewrite an entire life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more emotional, life-changing stories about second chances, unseen people, and the quiet miracles waiting in ordinary moments.